Hey guys, Jack on Wrist here, back with another video, and in today's video, I'm going to do an interesting comparison between a entry-level Seiko Quartz watch and a Grand Seiko Quartz watch. So basically, on the left here, we have a Seiko SUR307. Now this is a model that retails for about $250, but I acquired it for about $100. And on the right, we have a Grand Seiko SBGT035. It has about a $2,500 retail price, and I bought it for about $1,000. So either way you look at it, whether it's pre-owned or new, you're looking at about a 10 times difference in price. And so I think that really it's a good exercise to take a look at what do you get at the entry level, what do you get at the high end, and just kind of comparing the two. So we're going to go ahead and break down each of the watches, starting off with the case, and we're going to go ahead and look at the Seiko first, the Seiko SUR307. Now, this is in my opinion, a great value for money watch. We're going to talk about that further in the video. And I think, finishing-wise, in terms of the case, I think it's pretty good value for money. I think it really can compete well with anything in the sort of sub $500 price point. I would say you have a nice brushed lug, brushed mid case. You have a nice, polished edge there. You can kind of see, hopefully, the little cutoff between both the lug and the mid case here with that polish. You have a polished bezel, which I think looks really great, shines in the light well. Definitely a watch that looks nicer than it is. And you have a unsigned polished crown, definitely a price, cutting area there. But I really like the finishing job on this, and again, for about $100, I think it's a great finished watch for sure. But obviously, it does not compete with the Grand Seiko with their zaratsu polish. This watch is spectacular. All the different polishes, really catch the light so well. That bezel is spectacular. You can see it has a signed Grand Seiko crown that looks spectacular again. And you can really see the cutoff here. You can really see where it goes from a brushed on the lug to, again, polished, but this time polished all on the mid case. It's a little maybe scuffed up here by fingerprints, but really a spectacular watch in terms of finishing. I mean, people all the time talk about Grand Seiko finishing, the zaratsu polish. Is it phony? I would say 100% no. It really does shine so well. I mean, I've owned Omega, I've owned Rolex, but this Grand Seiko really just takes the cake in terms of finishing. I really have to say that. And so, obviously, I think that's one of the big areas you're going to get with a Grand Seiko versus the Seiko is that polishing and finishing for sure. Next, we're going to take a look at the dial, and I really am a fan of this Seiko dial. It is a pure silver sunburst effect dial. You have actually lume on this one, which is something you don't get on the Grand Seiko, which is interesting. And you have pretty well finished indices. Again, they shine in the light as well as I think you're going to get for sub $250, especially at the $100 price point. I think it really looks good. You can see it's a nice looking dial. I mean, it's a plain dial, just the Seiko applied logo, but it looks really good. Again, you get lume, you get little dots all around the 12 markers, and you have them on the hands as well. And so, I really think that it looks good, and again, this looks better than what you're paying for it. It looks like a really nice, well-finished dress watch, and at the end of the day, you're really not paying a whole lot for it. I think the dial is really cool, but it is more of a flat silver. It's really silver no matter where you turn it, whereas on this Grand Seiko, again, you're paying for a little bit more or a lot more, versatility or just changes. It's very interesting. Now, I'm not sure if it's going to be captured on the light here, but in some angles, it looks almost like a champagne. Again, that's sort of getting at it, not fully. In real life, it looks really great. Sometimes it looks like a pure white. Sometimes it looks like more of this silver. But you're really getting a lot of dimensions with this dial. It can look very different depending on the lighting. Now, if you're a fan of that flat silver, you just want it to be like a nice, shiny sunburst silver, I think that the Seiko is great. But if you want something that's going to be a little bit more interesting, obviously the Grand Seiko, again, another area they're just known for with the dials. They do a lot of spectacular things, and especially here, you can see a huge difference between, obviously just two sunburst silver dials. You can see that there's a huge difference here. Obviously, you have an applied Seiko logo, an applied Grand Seiko logo, and again, those indices again, are just another area where that zaratsu polish just really is important. You can see there the light, just how it beams off of it. Really awesome to see just on a day-to-day basis. When you flick your wrist over and you take a look at the time, you can really just see how awesome that finishing is. Again, you really have to see a lot of these Grand Seikos in person to really fully appreciate the polishing job on them. It is spectacular. And obviously, really quickly, I want to mention this has a day-date complication, whereas the Seiko has just a date. And so obviously I'm not going to really hold that against either of these two. They're just slightly different. Also, just quickly want to mention that this Seiko is a 40mm case, whereas the Grand Seiko is a 37mm case. But this is pretty much the closest I could get these two watches to be for this comparison. I also want to quickly mention that both these watches actually have a sapphire crystal, something you would definitely expect from the Grand Seiko. But for the Seiko, that is really great to see at about $100. A sapphire crystal, a huge plus. It just means it's going to be more resistant to scratches, and really great to see. Obviously, like I said, you fully expect that with the Grand Seiko, but on the Seiko here, it is great. They also both have 100 meters of water resistance as well, but both just push-pull crowns, no screw down. But again, from the Seiko $100 price point, again, it's really impressing me here with the Sapphire, with the 100 meters water resistance, really going above and beyond for what you would pay for one of these things. So next, we're going to be moving on to the bracelets. Now, on paper, both these bracelets actually look fairly similar. You can see here on the Seiko, you have sort of a brushed look with sort of that second and fourth link, if you see what I'm saying there. That is sort of polished finish. And again, on this Grand Seiko, you see that as well. You kind of have those inner, in-between polishes, and you have, a mostly brushed finish. But they are largely different bracelets. I mean, really, these bracelets, even though they look pretty similar, couldn't be farther apart. Let's start off with the Seiko here. It is a beautiful bracelet, I have to say. For the money, again, a beautiful bracelet. That polishing, though, not as good as the zaratsu polish from Grand Seiko. I mean, I didn't have to tell you that. But definitely, it does shine off the light pretty well. But these are actually, I don't know if you can see here, there is going to be a little line in between these links here because these are folded links, so they're going to be not as heavy, not as weighty, and they're not going to feel as nice as the Grand Seiko links. It also has a hollow end link to them, which again just isn't really the highest of quality. You're going to see this on cheaper watches. It also has a pin and collar system for the links. So basically all that adds up to just being a bracelet that is okay, but definitely really cheap. It's going to be a little rattly. It's going to, really just not feel super luxury. And again, you're only paying $100, so I'm not going to hold it against it, but definitely not the greatest bracelet in the world. You might want to just take this off and put it on a nice leather strap. But again, when you go to this Grand Seiko here, you have solid stainless steel links. You have screws on both sides. You have solid end links, and it's just a beautiful bracelet. I mean, this thing is spectacular. I know I use that word a lot when I'm talking about this Grand Seiko, but it just looks great. It feels hefty, high quality. Hopefully you can just see how it plays off the light. It really is something to see in person for sure. And moving on to the clasp here, the Grand Seiko has more of a very cool looking under the radar clasp. It just has the Grand Seiko stamp here, and you have a milled clasp. Now no micro adjustment here, so that's a big complaint you usually see with Grand Seiko, and honestly, rightfully so. No micro adjustments. You really have to find the right fit for you, and if you can't, you really might not be a candidate for their bracelet. And moving on to the Seiko clasp here, it just has a sort of stamped Seiko logo, double pushers here for a fold over clasp. But one thing that's really interesting is it does have one level of micro adjustment. Now that might not really give you a whole lot of flexibility in the bracelet, but the fact that there's micro adjustment on this and not the Grand Seiko is pretty funny, I think. You're paying $100 for a Seiko and you get micro adjustment, and when you pay $1,000 for a Grand Seiko, you don't get micro adjustment. So just something funny to talk about here. But obviously, like I just said, the big difference in the bracelet is, pretty much everything. It's going to be heavier, feel nicer, and just have screws, solid links, everything milled clasp on the Grand Seiko. And on this Seiko, again, really, it's just going to feel relatively cheap. But again, you're not paying a whole lot for this watch, so really it's not the end-all be-all here for this Seiko. So next we're going to be talking about the movement, probably one of the more important aspects of these two watches. Now both of them on the surface level are quartz watches, but there is a huge difference in the movement here. Starting off with this Seiko, we have a Seiko 6N52 quartz movement. Now, I haven't been able to find too much information on it, but my guess is it's about 15 to 20 seconds accuracy, plus or minus a month, which is pretty standard for quartz movements. I mean, you're going to see that on most G-Shocks and really just most quartz watches in general. And so it's not bad. It definitely gets the job done. You have a date complication, but nothing in particularly super special about this quartz movement. But again, it's going to be pretty accurate, and if you just want to have a nice daily dressier piece, you really can't go wrong with this Seiko here. And now movement-wise with the Grand Seiko, obviously this is the big dog. This is the 9F83 day-date quartz movement from Grand Seiko. Now the 9F quartz movement is pretty much famous for their plus or minus 10 seconds accuracy a year. Not a month, but a year, which is just ridiculous. And it has a 50-year service interval on it, so you really shouldn't have any issues other than changing the battery with this movement for most of your life. At least that's what they say. And you're really paying for the technology here. If you had to tell me, or ask me, I should say, what is the biggest thing that you're paying for, the biggest reason why there's a huge discrepancy between these two watches, I would personally say it has to be the movement. At least that's my opinion. It's just a luxury quartz movement if there is ever one. And you are really paying for so much technology and accuracy, and it's just amazing. I've loved my time with this 9F quartz movement, and there's definitely, it's definitely the reason why these Grand Seiko quartz watches are so loved by Grand Seiko collectors and by a lot of people. And obviously, that's a big difference here. Going from the Seiko to the Grand Seiko, you're going to be paying a price, and the part of that is getting this spectacular movement for sure. So what is my conclusion, pinning the $100 Seiko versus the $1,000 Grand Seiko? Well, personally, I think that the Seiko on the left here, the SUR307, is a awesome watch. I really think that it's a good value for money if you want something that's going to look good on wrist, that's going to keep good time, have a nice name on the dial. You're actually, not going to be able to go too wrong with this Seiko. But obviously, as you could have guessed, you're really getting upgrades in every single category with this Grand Seiko. Accuracy with that 9F quartz movement and that technology in there. The bracelet is so much better in terms of just heft, quality, finishing, again, case finishing. The dial is more interesting. You're obviously paying a lot more, but it really is going to pay off for you because you're getting a spectacular watch. But I'm actually really impressed with this Seiko on the left here. I mean, sapphire crystal, 100 meters water resistance. It looks good. I mean, it is a legitimately good watch, and for those of you who are looking for an entry-level Seiko or just an entry-level daily watch, I would have to definitely recommend this Seiko on the left here. So let me know in the comments section down below what you think about these two watches, and between the two, what would you rather get? Would you rather save your money and get something a little bit more affordable with this SUR307 Seiko on the left, or would you rather, pay up a little bit and get a spectacular watch in that Grand Seiko SBGT035? Let me know if you're considering buying a Grand Seiko quartz or a Seiko quartz. I'd love to talk to you guys in the comment section down below, but that's pretty much it for this video. So if you enjoyed, I would really appreciate it if you like and subscribe. I love making these videos. And with that being said, I will see you guys in the next one.